Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our final helping of the virtual breakfast for the 2020 season. My name is Eric Anderson. I'll be your host today, a field crops educator located down in the southwest part of the state. And with us today is Dr. Kurt Thelen. He will be sharing with us MSU's research and efforts with industrial hemp. And then following his presentation and a short Q&A, then we'll have Dr. Jeff Andreessen giving us an update on what we can expect for the short term on the weather front. So Kurt, thanks for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Eric, and good morning, everybody. As you can see from the cover slide, the industrial hemp team, if you will, at MSU, it really is a team process. And so what I'll be presenting today is kind of a compilation of observations of a number of different individuals that comprise the industrial hemp team. And just, I have a couple of background slides because probably for most of the audience, it's somewhat of a new crop. Industrial hemp is often confused with marijuana, which it is the same species, but it's a crop that's, the industrial hemp has been bred to have the THC, which is the hallucinating compound within marijuana, bred out of it. So when it's grown properly and you've got the right seed and everything, there's no risk really of it having any of those properties. It's less than 0.3% by definition. It's an annual broadleaf plant. They get rather tall, 6 to 13 feet, taprooted. And you can see some of the other distinctive features of it. It's one of the things that it's a little bit different with the crops that we're used to growing is that it's a dioecious plant, meaning that most of the plants are going to be either female or male. They don't have the same flower parts on the same plant in the wild type. There are some that have been bred to have that to be monoecious like our crops. They're primarily fiber varieties. So there's lots of end products with hemp. We have fiber varieties. We have those varieties that are raised for pharmaceutical use, like the cannabinoids they're called. You hear a lot about CBD. You see it on road signs when you're driving around the countryside. And industrial hemp does produce those cannabinoids, even though it doesn't have the THC cannabinoid. So it can still be used for those pharmaceutical uses. And then, of course, the grain itself. You can extract oil from the grain, or you can feed grain as just a grain source. And it's also used in, the grain is also used in some food products, snack products, those types of those niche type products. So some of the observations we have at Michigan State University, and I don't have any yield data yet for this year. We're still in the early stages of the starting to get going here with harvest. We had 2 planting dates there. We've got some stand information here that my grad student Ryan Farmer put together for us, and we're shooting for on order of for grain on somewhere around 9 to 13 plants per foot. And you can see we reach that except for 2 varieties. And that's one of the things with industrial hemp, with seed production, you kind of have to watch the seed you're getting, make sure you're getting good quality seed. Germination isn't always good, even though this year all but two of our varieties did quite well. Some of the field observations that we had for this year, it was much better than last year. Last year was a kind of a nightmare in Michigan for most crops, and industrial hemp is included in that. We do, and you'll see it on some of the other researchers too, observed a lot of weed pressure this year early on. So one of the myths that came out early in this is that you don't have to use herbicides or anything. The stand takes over. It is very aggressive growing early on. But you still have to use good weed management and then control your weeds. So far, we haven't had the bird damage that we had last year. That may be coming yet as our grain ripens. We noticed some random death of plants in the field. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk of Dr. Chilver's observations. We're working on identifying exactly what it was. We have a lot of secondary diseases coming into those plants that did die. It doesn't look like it'll affect overall yield too much, but we did, it was kind of a interesting observation that we had this year. And our different planting dates, we had May 28th and June 9th. Not a whole lot of difference visually in those plants at this point. The later ones caught up. We'll see what the yield data brings out. James Dedector up at Uprec in our Upper Peninsula has got a really good program going up there. We're doing some of the things in common with each other, and then we're also doing a few things different. He also has collaboration with Bay Mills Community College and the Traverse Bay Band up there, and he's looking at, he has a little different thing going with the CBD variety trials. We're limited to grain and fiber on campus, but he's got 36 varieties in the trial up there, so he'll have a lot of good information coming out of that. He's the same situation we're in. We don't have that harvest data yet. Some of his preliminary findings, white mold has been known to affect industrial hemp. He has seen some of that. Also, he's seen some European corn borer. You can see there that will also affect hemp. So another thing it has in common with corn, I guess. And then he also wanted to highlight here this Midwestern hemp database. We're working with a group in the Midwest where we kind of basically share our findings together, and since this is a new crop, kind of learn together type of thing. And it is accessible online there. You can see, you can go back later on and pull the slides up and get that URL off of that. Brooke Welk at KBS, this is his second year in collaborating with us. He's been looking at it primarily from the standpoint of it being a good cover crop. And it does have a lot of the criteria of a good cover crop. It gets up quickly. You get a lot of ground cover. As you can see in this picture here, there's a lot of ragweed mixed in there, and he did have some of the issues. He planted early, first week of May, hoping to get a good start, but he still had some weeds catching up in those stands. Chilver's lab, Austin McCoy, one of his students, was working primarily on the crop. They didn't note any real incidences of foliar diseases. We did have that, as I mentioned earlier, some of these wilted plants that were spotty within the field, and he's done some isolates on that, hoping to get some more information here once they start sequencing that to find out exactly what we're dealing with as the initial pathogen in those plants. But overall, not a whole lot of disease this year. This is a picture of one of those wilted plants. You can see it's pretty dramatic in the plant that it affects. It ends up dying, but it doesn't seem to be very widespread throughout the plot. They were able to isolate quite a number of just the common fungi that you find out there in the field in samples that they looked at, but again, no widespread disease apparent. Dr. Aaron Burns is doing the weed control on it, and this was, I believe this is 20 days after treatment. This slide looking at some pre-emergence treatments. You can see we do have issues there with some sensitivity to certain products. And just a reminder again, and there's another slide reminding, currently these products are not approved. We use them on an experimental basis. We can get special dispensation for that through special permits to do that, but overall in the field, those aren't available yet. This is a picture here of post-herbicide 7 days after application, and again, you can see some sensitivity there to some products, and then 20 days after, and some of that carried through to a little thinner stands that you can see there. But some of the products look like they have promise, hopefully for future use down the line as the commercial production increases. Here's the reminder again, no current herbicides approved. Hemp does grow very quickly and reaches a foot tall within 2 to 4 weeks, so there is potential there to suppress some weed germination later on. But again, as we found out this year, we were getting some of those escapes through that canopy. So it's best to kind of start out with weed-free fields if you can. And then the last one on there, there is sensitivity, especially you have to pay attention to what the previous year's herbicide program was. A couple of slides on the insect end of things, and so this information was put together by Dr. DeFonso, and it's in. I'll show you a slide coming up here on the resources that will cover. She has her own kind of a spin-off publication that came off the initial one that we put out last year that focuses on insects, and this is it right here. And again, you can go back later and look at the slides to get this, or you can Google industrial hemp production in Michigan and you'll get all the two different publications that we have to date. One of the things I wanted to bring attention to, that this is fairly recent here, the USDA is reopening public comment on their rules, their final rule. You can get more information on that on the Michigan Department of Agriculture webpage. They have an industrial hemp page. You can Google MDARD, industrial hemp, to get to that fairly easily. And there's information on there if you want to comment on the current federal regulation. You have the opportunity to do that now. And this here is the information resources that I mentioned. The two MSU bulletins that are currently out in the MDARD page. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back over to Eric if we have time for questions.
Yeah, we do have time for a couple. We've got a few in. One question came in and I answered it in the chat box, but maybe you have some insight. Do you know of either any research on campus or any that you've heard of, anyone feeding either the grain or just biomass to livestock in Michigan?
I am not aware in Michigan. I do know that nationally there are groups that are looking at that. So that is being pursued. And of course that information would be made available on a national basis once those studies are wrapping up. And
there are a few questions that may be more specific to the individual specialists who are working on these hemp projects. So anyone can feel free to chime in here. Mike asks, has powdery mildew been a problem in hemp?
I'll defer to Marty on that if he's available.
I'm here from Marty's group. This is Austin McCoy. We didn't see any powdery mildew this year. We had a good canopy coverage, like you would expect to see some powdery mildew issues with. And we also had adequate moisture, but I think it was, we just didn't see any this year. But it is one that we would expect to see on hemp, especially later in the season.
Okay. And Chris, this might be for you. How about potato leafhopper?
Potato leafhopper with, I can't see the question.
They're just asking, is potato leafhopper a problem?
I have not seen potato leafhopper damage on hemp. They are there, but the hemp stands that I've been in have been incredibly weedy, and it's almost like the leafhoppers are diminished across all of the weeds and the hemp. And even if they were a problem, I don't know what you'd do about it. There are insecticides labeled on industrial hemp. They are few and far between, and they are all kind of organic-y products that seem like they wouldn't do much on most of these insects. They might do something in a greenhouse, but in the field, I think they'd be very expensive and wouldn't do very much. So I have personally not seen potato leafhopper damage. I could conceive of it, however, if there was a lot of them and a broader stand without the weeds.
Okay. How does row spacing and planting density affect yield? So I'm guessing we're probably talking about either grain or fiber for that.
Yeah, there certainly is an effect, and we do have some guidelines that I covered on earlier that about plants per square foot, and it differs by what your end use is going to be. With the fiber production, we have a lot higher planting densities than we do for the grain. And we expect that it's going to be similar to what it is for other crops in that we can go too far. We'll probably get that, what we call that quadratic plateau effect, where your yield will level off, but you're just wasting money on more seed at that point. We're still trying to determine exactly where those points are. We haven't had enough years to investigate this to really know what those optimum planting dates are, but we do have some wide ranges that we have published in the bulletin, and then on the earlier slide that I had.
What about bees in hemp? Do bees like hemp? Do they hang out in hemp? Can I get hemp honey that way? What's the story?
Yeah, there are a lot of bees in hemp. A surprising number. There's both bumblebees and there's honeybees if they're nearby. In fact, I had to capture a bee and literally walk it over to the apiculture lady in a container so that she could actually see what hemp pollen looked like and that they were actually working it. They just seem to be getting a lot of pollen out of it. So, and once the flowers are done, then they sort of go away.
So there is such a thing as hemp honey, or at least CBD in there. And that's with the CBD infused. Just for the record, is there a way to get hemp honey, CBD in the honey just because bees are foraging through the hemp?
You're asking the wrong person. I'm not going to answer that. But it does look like they're mostly getting pollen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much nectar that they're actually taking. And I don't know what's in that nectar as far as compounds.
Okay. And Aaron Hill just had a general reminder for us all. If you do have any weeds that you suspect are resistant in your fields this year, to be sure to collect those samples, and you can call in or email in to the diagnostic lab for instructions on how to do that. And she also posted a website here with an article about screening. Oh, let's see what else. Got another question here. This is a hemp question. What systems or devices exist for harvesting, or is the plant harvested more by hand? And any of our specialists can handle that. I'm assuming, and you can kind of talk about it, according to what type of hemp. For grain and fiber is one system.
Type in a brief answer. The grain, you can use conventional gleaning equipment, combines. You're going to be moving a lot of material through the machine with those, so there's adjustments that you have to make. With regard to fiber, generally that's you usually let it red in the field for a while, so it would be in a windrow usually, so you can use conventional forage or haymaking equipment, something that's going to windrow it at first and then you come up and bale it later. The pharma stuff there generally requires a lot of hand labor. You're harvesting what they call the flower on that's basically the female buds. But there are mechanized systems that are being developed for that, for large field scales, where generally you plant, then you go through with a forage harvester, chop that stuff up, and then you would do an extraction similar to what we do with the mint. You would just extract it from all of the plant rather than separating the flower at the harvest. And there's some large operations that are kind of going that way to eliminate all the hand labor that's generally used, where you're out hand picking the flower and then extracting from that.
Kurt, I have a follow-up question on the hay binds. What kind of adjustments should we make on these rollers? Should we crimp the stalks? Because I know those stalks can get pretty thick. How would you adjust the hay bind compared to, say, conventional forages that are a little less thick?
Yeah, you do want it to dry down a little bit in that in the windrow, so it would probably be actually quite similar, I would think, to what you're doing for hay. The end result, you still want to end up with a bale, a dry bale. With the retting process, you want to leave it in that windrow laying in the field for a little while. That starts the biological breakdown to expose the fibers. So it's going to be laying in that windrow a little bit longer than you would a conventional hay, but you still want to get to that end point of having a dry bale. Hopefully that helps.
What moisture is dry that it'll keep?
Well, similar to hay, you'd want to be somewhere down around 15% moisture or so for that to keep. And they don't have any really what you'd call just-in-time type processing for the fibers, so you're probably going to be marketing bales if you get into that, the fiber side, dry bales.
So I've got one more weather question. If we don't end up doing any more of the weather sessions here on into the harvest season, we've had this discussion earlier in the season, but Jeff, do you have any suggestions for weather apps that we can rely on, maybe Enviro Weather or WeatherBug, or what are the different options, and rank them for us?
Looks like he's gone to class, Eric.
We can all chime in because you
I
all
think he
are
has
weather
class at
bugs.
8.
I just loaded WeatherBug. I haven't used it hardly at all. I like AccuWeather for, what's coming up in the next couple hours. Seems to be the most accurate for longer term. I like the Weather Underground. That seems to be more. I don't have the Weather Channel app. Anybody else have any comments, apps that they like that have been really accurate? All right, back to hemp. How about deer or woodchucks? Anything in the research plots that you've seen? You've mentioned birds a few times, but how about the other four-legged creatures?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of deer pressure where we're at on campus there, but we haven't seen anything to speak of. We did have some at the Hort farm. Well, of course, we had a fence there. I'm not able to answer that. I don't know if James is up from the Upper Peninsula, if he's seen much. I don't know if he's on or not. Woodchucks are going to bother anything, at least my experience.
So I've got comments from one grower locally. He had heard that stands can get really decimated by deer, and so he went out there and at least did a perimeter spray with one of these porcine dried blood type products. And so I thought, oh, well, I'll do that. So I actually did that last year. Sprayed our sweet corn and the hemp that I did have growing, and we didn't have any problems actually. And this year I didn't spray anything, and we ended up tilling our corn under because of the deer and raccoon, but that's really just anecdotal. So anyone else on the call here this morning that grows hemp, that feel free to chime in. You can just unmute yourself and tell us about experiences that you've had in the last couple of years with deer or rodent damage.
So Eric, I can tell you a little bit about the CBD that I grew. I had heavy deer pressure around it in the spring of last year, but never had any issues with them eating it. More problems with them walking through the field and punching through the plastic and hitting the drip tape, but really no pressure as far as them eating it that way. We did have a significant amount of pressure from geese last year in the grain that we grew. Now that might have been because it was so late. We didn't plant it until quite late, and it might have been the only green thing for them to find. But after about a week of them eating it and the crop growing taller and getting more leaves on it, they seem to not prefer those fields anymore.
Geese. Yeah, I just flew another field last week, a soybean field. They took out about 5 acres, just totally wiped it out.
Eric, Aaron Hill wanted to make an announcement about some weed seeds.
Okay, sure.
Aaron?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Might have an echo. Yeah, Eric kind of covered it a little bit, so that's why I didn't chime in, but it was just reminding people that we are still doing herbicide resistance screening of weeds in the diagnostic clinic. this fall and winter. So if you have weeds you suspect of being resistant to, be sure to collect seed and turn those in by mid-November at the latest. We do have free screening for soybean growers for our typical species, which are the pigweeds, lamb's quarters, mare's tail, and the ragweed species. And then new this year, we have free screening for any weed species for weeds that are coming out of vegetable rotations. And that is work that's been funded by the Michigan Vegetable Council with Dr. Sushila Shadhari.
Okay, thanks, Erin. I did have one question. I think this question was referring to the dried blood product. It says how wide of a band. I just used a backpack sprayer, so it was maybe 2 to 3 feet wide. The grower that said he was using it, I don't know what kind of application equipment he was using. If it was more of an ATV sprayer, or if it was wider than that. I've heard, I guess again anecdotally, I've heard from sweet corn farmers, corn farmers, seed corn down in my area, trying to ward off deer, and it's been hit and miss. We've got reports that it does really well, and other times it really has failed. So got one comment in here. There's some equipment developing in Canada for decorticating green hemp. So with the assumption there that you would not have to let it sit and rot in the field. So decorticating, that's where you're separating the fibers out for the fibrous hemp. Blaine had a comment here. He's buying CBD hemp stock. So just to clarify, Blaine, you're looking for stalks from biomass that's already been stripped off of CBD. You're not looking for fibrous hemp stalks. You're looking for CBD hemp stalks. Is that what I'm hearing or reading?
Correct. Yeah, we have a machine and a way to process those CBD stalks, separate the herd from the fiber, and it looks like we're developing a market for the herd part of it for sure. So yeah, really excited to be able to do that this fall. So really all we want is just the stalks.
Okay. And Blaine has his email address in the chat for those who might be interested. Phil, why don't you go ahead and wrap us up with RUP credits and survey information.
Thank you, Eric. Eric, I just want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Andresen for his weekly weather updates. He was on every single week for us this year, and that's really a large commitment. So we want to say thank you to Jeff for all of his updates. It is really a very big part of our virtual breakfast, and I want to especially say thank you, and we'll probably be in contact with you talking about whether monthly updates are going to be, or weekly updates are going to be coming forward.
Thanks.
In addition to that, I want to say thank you to all the specialists that were part of the virtual breakfast this past year. We have a large group that has been very involved, and many of these specialists have been in the background answering questions, available for anyone to talk with producers or agribusiness. And so I do want to say, again, thank you to our specialists and also to our hosts, all of the field crops educators that have been part of the virtual breakfast this past season. I think it's been a huge success. We do need your help, and there's an evaluation link in the chat box, and I'm asking for everyone to please go to that evaluation link and fill out this very short online question and answer, and it should only take you less than 5 minutes. So it's a very brief question and answer for evaluation. Extension does rely on this as far as information, and we are always interested to hear what you have to think personally, as well for me, as well as the other educators. If you have comments or questions that you would like to present to us about the virtual breakfast, feel free to contact any of us by email. And again, thank you everyone for being part of MSU Extension's virtual field, or not field day, but virtual breakfast series during 2020.